Good morning or good afternoon, whenever it may be that you're watching this. This is the midweek video for August the 19th. I have to look at a calendar. Woke up this morning thinking about Bob Dylan's song in which he's saying, you're going to have to serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. And inherent in each one of us is the need to serve. Inherent in each one of us is the fulfillment that comes from serving. Sometimes, as Bob Dylan alluded to, sometimes we serve the wrong thing, the wrong people, the wrong purpose. Sometimes, most of the time, before we come to Christ, we're serving ourselves, but we're going to serve somebody. I thought about this verse in Matthew 20. And Jesus said, whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your bondservant. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's an interesting, mind-blowing statement, that the Son of Man came not to be served. If anyone deserves to be served, it's him, but he came to serve. He came to serve the Father, and in so doing, he served humanity, mankind. And so I just thought about a few things about serving, some principles of serving. I'm going to go through it real quickly. Certainly can't spend any time on this. But if you start thinking about principles of serving and our serving other people and serving God, the first one that you have to come to the conclusion is that serving God's people is equal to serving God. Sometimes we say, well, I'll serve God, but I'm not going to serve any man. Well, God has a different idea about that. And Paul writes in Colossians that whatever you do, work at it wholeheartedly, as though you were doing it for the Lord, and not merely for people. I'll read that again. Whatever you do, work at it wholeheartedly, as though you were doing it for the Lord and not merely for people. And he continues by saying, it is the Lord Christ whom you are serving. When you're serving God's people, you're serving God. As a matter of fact, you'll recall in Matthew 25 when Jesus went through a dissertation where he said, when I was hungry, you brought me food, and when I was thirsty, you brought me water. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I was naked, you gave me clothes. When I was sick, you took care of me. And when I was in prison, you visited me. And they said, how in the world we hadn't done it? And Jesus said, if you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. So serving God's people is equal to serving God. A second principle is pretty obvious, and that is serving provides us an opportunity to go beyond ourselves. Self-centeredness is our biggest enemy in humanity, and especially even as Christians, we have to fight self-centeredness and selfishness. And so if I can serve somebody else and go beyond myself, then I've gotten half the battle won. Jesus said, if anyone wants to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Taking up cross is certainly not self-centeredness. The cross is the point of crucifixion, and it's where our will and God's will meets. Jesus himself could have refused to get on the cross. As a matter of fact, he tells us that he could have called 10,000 angels to remove him from that cross, and yet he allowed himself to die for mankind. Another principle is serving others. This is a practical principle. Serving others frees up time for them to do other things. Acts chapter 6, the apostles were faced with an issue with the Hellenistic widows not being fed, so they identified 7 men, which we would refer to as deacons, and they took care of the practical issues regarding these widows, and it frees up time. Another one, and this is a very important one, is that serving is done to the other person's specifications and desires. If you're going to serve somebody, serve them the way they want to be served. If you're going to mow someone's grass, mow it the way they want it mowed. If you're going to wash someone's car, wash it the way they want it washed. not the way you want it washed and not the way you think it should be done. So we serve other people according to their specifications and their desires. If we insert ourselves into that process, we're not really serving, we're just interjecting ourselves. Another interesting principle of serving is that it begins in the household of faith. That doesn't mean it stops there. It just begins there. Paul's writing to the church in Galatia, and he says, whenever we have the opportunity, let us practice doing good to everyone, especially to the family of faith, especially to the household of God. We start there. If you want to learn to be a servant, serve God's people. For one thing, we would hope that they would be more patient with you when you mess up. They would be more patient and merciful with you when you don't do it exactly right. And then when you do go outside the kingdom of God, outside the church to serve people, you will have some experience under your belt and you can do it in a way that honors God. But serving begins in the household of faith. Find something you can do for someone. Find something you can serve someone else. Again, you've heard me say many times, my pastor, Curtis Foreman, for many years, said we must go beyond ourselves if we're going to find God. And many of us are trying to find God in a self-centered manner and focusing on ourselves. But if we really want to connect with God, we've got to get beyond ourselves, our desires, our agendas that hold us back. And then lastly, serving is a tangible means of demonstrating our love for one another. You know, Jesus said, this is how they're going to know that you're my disciples, and that is that you have love for one another. Paul again writes in Galatians, he says, through love, make it your habit to serve one another. Because of your agape, because of your love, your commitment, your decision to walk in covenant with brothers and sisters, because of that, make it your habit. Now that's interesting that he says habit. So sometimes we just say, man, I'm going to go serve somebody, make a big deal out of it, and get that quota out of the way. Paul's saying make it a habit of serving one another, something you do all the time. He says, because the whole law is summarized in one statement: you must love your neighbor as yourself. Is it possible that you could love your neighbor? Is it possible that you could love your brother and your sister and not serve? Is it possible that you can extend agape to brothers and sisters and not commit yourself and give of yourself? We've always said agape is a word of action. It's not just a word of affirmation, although it is affirmation. But if there's true agape, if there's true love for brothers and sisters, there's going to be some corresponding action that moves us into a place of serving. So, as Bob Dylan said, you're going to have to serve somebody. It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to serve somebody. I pray that everyone watching this video would have already committed themselves to serving the Lord and going beyond themselves to extend themselves to other people, because he gave us that example. He was the very first one to demonstrate. When he said he didn't come to be served, he came to serve. And so if we really want to find the pinnacle of our Christian experience, if we really want to find the fulfillment of our walk with Christ, let us find opportunity to serve others. And by serving others, we serve God. I hope that gives you something to think about as you carry on the rest of your week, and gives you the ability that you can go out there and act like somebody. Good day.